Servus and greetings from Vienna. My name is Anita Posch. Thank you for listening to Bitcoin & Co., my podcast that's introducing the philosophy, ideas and people behind Bitcoin. Hello friends, thanks that you're here again, listening to the Bitcoin & Co. podcast. Today's guest is Hass McCook. He's a civil engineer working on economic infrastructure like building roads and tunnels and has a lot of experience in mining. He did his MBA in Oxford and conducted his first research about the sustainability of Bitcoin in 2014. He updated and expanded his work in 2018 with the paper The Cost and Sustainability of Bitcoin and was presenting his insights into the environmental and social impacts of gold and Bitcoin at the Baltic Honeybadger Conference in Riga in 2019. That's also where we met and had a chat about all these topics. It's the second of 9 interviews I did in Riga. So don't miss the upcoming interviews and subscribe to the show in your podcast player now. You can also find the recommendations and details of this episode and the player buttons on the episode page at bitcoinandco.com/en. That's bitcoinandco.com/en. And before we start, I want to thank my sponsors. Without their support, this podcast would simply not be possible. And they have great products and services, so please listen to their messages. Thank you. I approached Shift Crypto Security because I feel like we care about the same things. My absolute belief is in independence. This is a value that drives all of Shift's products too. We both believe that everybody should be the holder of their own keys, and a well-built hardware wallet is the safest way to hodl your coins. So when Shift announced the Bitbox 02, we made it happen. The Bitbox 02 is Swiss-made, secure and easy to use. It has invisible touch sensors and USB-C, and it also comes as a Bitcoin-only edition. That's something I believe in too. So I encourage you to check it out at shiftcrypto.ch. That's shift, CRIPTO.ch. And you can get free shipping with the code Anita. The Bitbox 02 by Shift Crypto Security. Paying with cryptocurrencies in everyday life and that with any wallet? Salamantex makes it possible now. Cheap, fast and easy. At the checkout or online. All Salamantex merchants and further information about the Salamantex digital payment system can be found at www.salamantex.com/customers. That's www.salamantex.com/customers. So, hello. My new guest is Hass McCook from Australia. Thanks for your time.
Oh no, thank you for having me. Very humbled to be here and looking forward to the chat.
Yeah, I'm too, because we have a very interesting topic, which is also a topic that's always discussed in highly emotional, moods. And but before we start talking about the energy consumption of Bitcoin, please tell us what's your story, where do you come from, and how did you get into the Bitcoin sphere?
Yeah, so basically I don't know if it's a very unique story, but none of my background is in IT or coding and computing, so I'm actually a civil engineer by background. So I used to work on very large infrastructure projects, so what they call economic infrastructure, so roads, highways, water infrastructure and the like. So after working for about 8 or 9 years in the infrastructure world, I went off to Oxford to do an MBA, and that's where I fell down the rabbit hole of Bitcoin and realized that there's no real economic infrastructure worth developing or pursuing other than Bitcoin. It's the essential economic infrastructure to move civilization forward for the coming millennia. So that's how I got into Bitcoin.
But how did you get to know people in Oxford who were into Bitcoin, or?
Not really. I heard passing things about discussion of Bitcoin. A lot of people were actually quite dismissive of Bitcoin. Which I found weird in a so-called a bastion of progressive thought and thought leadership and all of that kind of stuff. But there were a couple of guys interested in it. They directed me to the white paper. I read it, was fascinated by it, and very, very shortly thereafter, as soon as I moved back to Sydney and had control of a bank account, I did the very dumb thing of going all in at the top in late 2013. But strong hand, held strong, and it's the faith has been repaid.
So the lesson is hold it long. And
hold it strong, no matter what.
Yeah. I thought you say now you were getting into it in 2017.
No.
Because that's what I made. But I'm holding. So
either way, it's still tough to cycle between paper wealth and paper poverty. So bear markets are bad for everyone, even for the old holders.
Yeah, and of course, and I'm not only in for the price. I'm in for the concept, the possibilities.
Yeah.
So I'm not looking at the price actually.
So price is unfortunately peak human psychology, and there's when there's a lot of no coiners. If they know you're a Bitcoiner, you won't hear the end of it in a bear market. Oh, how's that Bitcoin going? Oh, how's that Bitcoin going? Have you lost a lot of money? Did you sell your Bitcoin? So that's probably why price is sometimes front and center. But yeah. Don't worry about the price. Worry about the future of our civilization. So Bitcoin will succeed because it must, and that's why we're here.
But what is the core problem? Do you think? What can Bitcoin do? What can it solve?
Basically, it's hard money is quite difficult, to centralize and manipulate, and because of all of this easy money, fiat money, printable money. This has spurred an era, an age of consumerism. And, the point we're probably going to touch on later on in the pod is that, don't worry too much about, Bitcoin's energy consumption because, global warming and, the environmental problems we face today are 100% a result of fiat fueled consumerism. So the more shit we buy, the more plastic we buy, the worse off the planet is. And then they want to come talk to me about Bitcoin using electricity.
Yeah, exactly. I think consumerism is the biggest problem we have. And even in the countries which don't have that much money as we have, it starts. It's we make debt to buy stuff that's only for the short term, and the big guys get richer and richer. And we see it in Europe everywhere, I guess. And I think it's also the reason why we have many, I would say, right-wing parties. And that I think that, I don't know your opinion about it, but I think that democracy is really in danger at the moment.
Yeah, I totally agree. So, I personally think in the long term, a lot of people talk about getting money out of politics. Governments corrupt, this and that. The goal here is to get politics out of money, and I think once we starve the beast, I think Bitcoin, as a concept is something extremely democratic, voluntary, and I do see the decentralized nature of Bitcoin. When it does take over, will enable more sort of decentralized governance. Local communities governing themselves. Us Bitcoiners living in the citadels governing ourselves. So I really do think I totally agree with the Bitcoin fixes this meme. I don't really see anything that Bitcoin can't fix.
At least we have the possibility or an alternative now to try something else.
Definitely.
Yeah. And as we see it at the moment, we have three kinds of monies. coming, the state money, the corporate money, maybe, no? The Libra and JP Morgan coin and that stuff, and Bitcoin as we say, money for the people and for the individuals. And I also think that it's a good thing for local communities and regional economies and stuff. Yeah. So, but, how did you get interested in the energy consumption? I think you did research on that.
So I first did my research in 2014. So because I unfortunately can't really contribute much in terms of code and code reviews and all that kind of stuff, I used my civil engineering background in tunneling and mining to try get front and center that in the scheme of things, Bitcoin's environmental impact is nothing compared to like gold mining, platinum mining, all of that kind of stuff, but especially gold mining. People really don't realize how toxic gold is for the environment. So I think even as an investment, if you want to be ethical and honest with yourself and pro environment and all that, drop your gold and go smelt it straight away. Like I know you might have a wedding ring or something like that. Smelt it anyway, and just sign a message in the blockchain showing your eternal love for your partner. Simple as that. Don't waste your money on gold. Stack sats. Save the environment.
Yeah, that's interesting, actually. But can we take a look at the reason why Bitcoin needs so much energy?
Yeah. So so effectively, this is the long and short of it. Second law of thermodynamics, right? Energy can't be created out of thin air. It's got to be transferred. So when we work, we put our energy into something. Our energy is valued by the market in some capacity, and we're rewarded for our work. So because you can't create something out of nothing, Bitcoin necessarily has to use energy. And to take it one step further, Bitcoin is, to me, simply the monetization of energy. So eventually, everything in the world, just like gold was a benchmark for energy, because gold isn't easy to mine and you have to put work in to extract gold. Bitcoin's no different.
It's also interesting comparison, because I think Andreas Antonopoulos said that once, like a proof of work is also the pyramids of Gizeh, the Egypt pyramids.
Yep.
They're also a proof of work, and it's also a lot of energy that has been put in there. And for hundreds and thousands of years, we can see this proof of work now. And it's quite the same with Bitcoin.
And I'm happy you mentioned the Great Pyramid of Giza, because every year to bring up just a little bit of gold, 3,000 tons or whatever it is, with the waste rock that's generated from mining, you can build 1,000 Great Pyramids of Giza with it.
Wow.
Yeah, so like the gold you make is, enough to fill like a flat floor to ceiling, and the rock you need to dig through to extract that gold. Yeah, mountains and mountains and mountains of it.
I didn't know that.
Very few people do know that.
I only heard that all the gold that we have, like really we can see it or touch it, is only about 3 swimming pools big. Is this right? So like
so
big
basically,
Olympic,
every year, 3,000 tons are mined. Gold. So a cubic meter of gold weighs 9 tons. So, the yearly, heavy,
but small.
Yeah. So that's why like a little bullion the size of a brick weighs like 20 kilos or something. Like gold is very heavy duty, very extremely dense. But the anecdote I hear is that all the gold ever mined in history can fit under the atrium of the Eiffel Tower. That's the unit of measure that I hear a lot.
Okay.
But the yearly production, it's like 350 cubic meters, so you can fill like a little 1-bedroom flat floor to ceiling. That's it. That's all the gold that gets pulled out of the mountains and mountains of rock
how much
every
stone?
year.
How much rock did you say?
So 1,000 Great Pyramids of Giza, 400,000 Olympic swimming pools, so over 1 trillion liters of water, and about 500,000 tons of cyanide to leach the gold out of the ore.
And
it's a lot of cyanide. Yeah. That's almost a quadrillion lethal doses.
Okay, so it's environmentally
A disaster, yeah. And they use cyanide simply because it's safer than mercury. But all the illegal child miners in Africa, South America, Southeast Asia, they still use the old mercury techniques. Mercury by hand. It really is a disaster, actually. So I recommend everyone hop on YouTube in a couple of days' time. Get the Baltic Honeybadger Conference up, have a look at my talk, and you'll see how really, really, really damaging gold is for the environment.
And did you also research money, like fiat money, printed money, and coins?
Yes. That was in 2014. So when I revisited the work in 2018, I didn't really look at fiat money because it's too hard. How do you really judge the social impact? So environmental impact, I did do an analysis on the environmental impact of printing paper, minting coins. I did an analysis of how many banknotes there are in the world, what material they are. Some are paper, some are, plastic, some are vinyl. I did an assessment of, all the bank branches in the world, how much, all that kind of stuff. But, if you want to talk about social impact, basically every single thing wrong in society is because of fiat. And that's, not a lot of people will take you seriously if you try write that in a piece of research.
Do you have also a result on the energy consumption of the banking world, like the financial transactions?
Back in my 2014 work, it was, look, bank transactions. It's like, actual transacting is nothing. It's the physical presence of the bank's offices, hundreds and thousands of employees, electricity to keep the lights on, to keep the elevators powered, to keep the ATMs on, the millions of ATMs. Banks are getting better. They are moving to a lot more like, at least in Australia, online-based services. So the quantity of branches is getting smaller. But Australia is a very small part of the world, and for the billions of the rest of the world, they if they even have access to a bank branch, there's still a lot of old school a branch-based system, simply because their internet infrastructure and whatnot isn't ready for robust online banking.
So what was the result of your 2014 research?
Look, back then Bitcoin was like a minnow. So it was like 5% of the impact of, the emissions.
Yeah, because we have to
energy, or not really emissions, energy consumption. So there's a huge, that's the sticking point of the whole discussion. So Bitcoin uses a lot of energy and therefore a lot of emissions.
That's the question.
So if you look back through the history of not even civilization, humanity, we took leaps forward as humans through the discovery of new energy sources. So it all started with fire. We harnessed the power of fire, and that enabled us to settle communities, cook food, all of that kind of stuff. Moving forward, from fire, industrial revolution, steam power, coal power, the more energy we unlocked, the more we progressed as a society. That said, we've been using a lot of dirty energy, and it's resulted in a couple of problems, hasn't it? But with that said, as time goes on, as technology improves, we've got a lot of effectively emission-free technologies now. So right now, about 18% of the world's global energy mix is renewable. So not very high, could be better, but renewables like hydro, very cheap, and Bitcoin miners, they're looking for profit, and bigger profit means cheaper energy, so they will flock to whatever the cheapest energy source is. So you find a lot of mines, people say, mining's centralized in China, but that's actually a very widely misunderstood falsehood. So the estimates on emissions vary quite greatly. So there's been a couple of like good research papers. So the Cambridge Centre for Alternative Finance, they did an extremely robust piece of research. They went out, interviewed miners, figured out where, all the miners were based, how much megawatts of power they were putting on and all that, what mix of renewables they were using. They found that about 28% of Bitcoin's energy is powered by renewables. On the other side of the spectrum, you have Chris Bendixson at CoinShares put out some research, and their estimate is 78% renewables. And you've got the full spectrum in between. But effectively, doesn't matter how much energy Bitcoin uses. What matters is the emissions. And, give it another 5 to 10 years, Bitcoin will be using heaps of energy and emitting basically nothing because, it'll be powered by hydro, nuclear, solar, wind, just the cheaper energy sources. It just won't be profitable to mine with coal because you simply can't get cheap coal. So I'll give you another example. In America, in Texas, they're getting wind energy for 3 cents a kilowatt hour. So a lot of people are mining with wind, hydro. So the future does look bright, for Bitcoin in terms of emissions versus energy use.
Mm-hmm. You're talking about the future. How will the energy consumption or the energy need of Bitcoin change in the coming years?
Up, up, up. Number go up.
Yeah, but not exponentially. Or it's not like the more transactions, the more.
Now, the reason not exponentially is there's a couple of important metrics with ASIC miners. The two metrics are dollars per hash and kilowatt hours per hash. So as we move forward, we're finding that the kilowatt per hash is going lower. So even though the hash rate is increasing effectively exponentially, we're also getting efficiency improvements in the tech. So the energy demand is increasing a lot, but that's what proof of work is. If you want to secure a lot of value, you've got to do work, and that's basically the long and short of it.
Yeah, and also I think with second layer solutions and side chains, we can do more transactions and don't have more proof of work to do.
Yeah, exactly. So there's another person that does research. He's more of a no-coiner troll, Digiconomist, and I don't disagree with his methodology at all. So my methodology is actually extremely similar to his. We get similar figures, but his conclusions are just intellectually dishonest. So for example, he says, Bitcoin uses, as much as 10 houses do per year for like one transaction, which is totally false because we can, with things like Lightning, you can effectively have infinite transactions. So kilowatt hours per transaction will effectively be nothing. And the energy used will just exist to secure the network and to continue to give the coins value because work is going into it.
Mm-hmm. I've read now the hash rate at the moment is at the highest level.
Yeah.
Is it true?
You'll find that every 2 weeks it's at the highest level.
Yeah,
so we only had the death spiral FUD earlier in the year, but if you look back through the history of Bitcoin, so through the thousands of difficulty adjustments, the average fortnightly increase is like 6%. So give next year, I'd say like this time next year the hash rate will be double.
Oh wow! Because there will be more interest in mining Bitcoin again because the price will go up, or
not just that. Equipment just gets cheaper. So your dollars per hash on your mining rigs just gets cheaper. So because it's cheaper, the profit margin increases. So people just buy more ASICs to fill the void. So as dollar per hash drops and people discover cheaper sources of electricity, hash rate has nowhere to go but up. And if the price is increasing, so like my estimates now, my modeling is telling me that the cost to mine a Bitcoin is only about $6,500. Mm-hmm. So there's good profit to be made.
At
But
the
in
moment,
every single market, in long-term equilibrium, profit is zero. So, people are putting on more hash power to capture this, this big profit. The weekend miners that are getting, 10 cents per kilowatt hour electricity, probably costing them like $9,500 to mine a Bitcoin. But the big, like industrial mines that are getting, their power for, 2, 3, 4 cents a kilowatt hour, they're making some very good money at the moment. Earlier in the year, we got a flushing of all of the inefficient miners when we took that drop from $6,000 down to $3,000, and the hash rate for like two or three consecutive difficulty adjustments was negative, which was the first time ever happened in Bitcoin. So there was an aggressive. It's almost like when the whales on BitMEX and all of that just short hard to just try to liquidate everyone, even if it means a little bit of temporary pain for them. Would have been the exact same thing with the big miners. They would have just. I think it was one of the big contributors to the price falls was miners at war with each other. Mm-hmm. And this happens in traditional markets as well. So, for example, if you have a look at OPEC, when America was pumping gas. Fracked natural gas and oil and all that kind of stuff, and they were pulling it out for $60 a barrel when oil was $80, and OPEC said we can't let this shit happen, so they pumped up production. Oil price dropped to $40 a barrel, and the Americans just couldn't compete, so they started shutting down plants, and that's just how commodity works. Like it's a tough game. It's just as tough as trading. So the big guys flushed the little guys out, and now they're making good coin, as they say.
Okay, how many mining manufacturers are there?
There are a couple. There's probably 4 or 5. So, but the big ones would obviously be Bitmain, Dragonmint, Canaan. Bitfury, but right now the market is still predominantly driven by Bitmain Antminer S9s. So even S9s, they're a little old, quite old. The dollar per hash is almost nothing. So even though it's not very efficient from a kilowatt per hash point of view, their newer rigs like the S17 and stuff far more efficient, but their dollar per hash is way too high. So it's Bitmain's S9 is still currently the predominant mining rig that people are using. Simply because it's the cheapest, and that's basically rational market behavior. Go for the cheapest.
So it's like on those companies to build more efficient miners.
Or miners that just are more profitable for people. But all mining companies they have to innovate, and in business in general, especially in a hyper competitive market, there's only 2 ways to stay in business. So you can either be an innovation leader and make the best stuff, or you can be a cost leader and make the cheapest stuff. There's always that fine line. Do we make the cheapest stuff, or do we make more expensive, efficient stuff? So the efficient ASIC models are probably more relevant for people that live in or are mining with quite expensive energy. So they save on their energy bills with a bit more upfront capex. But if you're mining for like almost nothing, you don't care how much energy it uses, and you just go for the cheapest dollar per hash unit that you can get.
Before we continue, a short message from my longtime show supporters at Card Wallet. Thank you. We'll be back soon. Do you want to keep your Bitcoin safe long term? The Card Wallet is the best cold storage solution a retail customer can get. It's easy to use and completely offline. No hassles with updates, passwords or hacks. I gave one to friends as a wedding gift. They are Bitcoin newbies, but with the card wallet, even they can hodl Bitcoin securely. And the best thing is, my friends at cardwallet.com made a special offer for all the listeners of my podcast. If you go to www.cardwallet.com/Anita, you'll get 20% off the price. So go to www.cardwallet.com/Anita now and buy a card wallet with a 20% discount. Do you have any numbers on how much electricity or communication is using, like Facebook and stuff, all our social media?
Again, hard to say because, your computer is on anyway. Your phone is on anyway. Their offices probably use a lot of power and their servers probably use, a lot of power, their data centers.
Yeah.
But they're just another cog in the world's industrial machine that uses power. So I haven't looked too deeply into that kind of stuff.
So you're from Australia.
Yeah.
So actually, the country from the sun would be predestined for solar power.
Yeah, that's what one would assume. But we currently pay 28 cents a kilowatt hour. So there are no mines in Australia.
So there is also no solar power, or what's the problem here?
It's the growth is quite slow. You'd be surprised. So it is starting. The industry is starting to grow, but our government still unfortunately has a fetish with coal. Our coal lobbies are extremely powerful, and coal is basically what's the only thing left driving our economy. So we had, the housing boom and the resources boom. When China was on fire, we couldn't get coal and iron ore to them fast enough. So they're, not very visionary, our governments, but, what do you do?
And how are regulators and legislation and the government in Australia dealing with Bitcoin and crypto stuff?
Right now, they're taking sort of an arm's length approach. So in terms, the regulation is still quite unclear. Nobody knows how to deal with it, for tax purposes. But in terms of stamp downs, crackdowns, all of that kind of stuff, where it's pretty laissez-faire at the moment. So they're not overly threatened by it yet. But we'll see how it goes. But on the topic of governments, I always tell people governments are effectively a state of mind. Every organization is, and organizations are basically, built up of people. So give it another 10, 15 years, a lot of politicians will have Bitcoin, and all politicians are self-serving. So they're never going to legislate against their own bank balance. So I think it's an inevitability, thanks to the one of Bitcoin's best tailwinds pushing it forward is peak human psychology and greed. So that's as Adam Meister would call the 80%ers, and the 20%ers we're just probably more interested in building and educating for now.
So it's the Pareto principle also here. Yeah, it's true. Yeah. So do you also attend Bitcoin meetups or something like that?
Yeah, all the time. We got a pretty vibrant scene in Sydney. So we got Stefan Livera down there with me. A couple of other big guys. Alex Svetsky is based in Brisbane. So is Tim Dargavel. They come down and visit. We've got Bill Burden. So he's down in Canberra, but he comes up and visits us as well. So it's we got a good growing crew in Australia. We got a lot of B caches. We do apologize for Craig Wright. Like we're really sorry. But yeah, so aside from that dude, we've we got a flourishing Bitcoin community. There's still a lot of shit coining, but eventually, as time moves forward, that'll all get flushed out. The king is regaining his dominance, and I think the altcoins will continue to bleed and die a slow death.
And do you also see these changes in the attendance? Like when you do a Bitcoin meetup in 2017, there are like hundreds of people, and if you did it in 2018, there were like 10 people.
Yeah, so 2018, once I was the only person at the meetup. Like I rocked up and no one was there.
It's your own meetup.
Yeah, so but now like we've got so the last meetup I went to, probably like 2 weeks ago, like we, it was just a casual drinks event, and like we didn't even have enough seats. There was like 25 of us. And then when we put on like the proper events, like where there's a speaker and whatnot, we fill a pretty big room. So there's a good 30, 40 people coming. But yeah, a year ago we'd get 6 or 7 people, and those 6 or 7 people were like, the believers, the Bitcoiners.
They are the 20%.
And it was more like, just it was, I don't know, like you wouldn't call it a circle jerk, but it's effectively, it's just basically self-reinforcing little
Group.
bubble.
Yeah.
But the crowd is starting to expand. Again, peak human psychology. They see number go up, and they're like, oh, Bitcoin's back. I thought that was dead. Like I need to go learn like about Bitcoin. So they start looking up meetups and come through.
Yeah, that's true. So, also people say that Satoshi has probably built in these, the idea of this distribution curves, interesting stuff, yeah. So, what's your conclusion? I have this number in my head that Bitcoin needs the electricity of like a small country like Austria or something.
Oh, more than that.
More than Austria.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. And that's a horrible number for people who don't know anything about Bitcoin. They just say, we don't need it. I mean, it's energy that it's lost. And if you say, but it's solar powered, so where's the loss? It's still a loss. So what's your conclusion? It's a lot of energy.
In terms of how much energy Bitcoin uses, there is more energy lost flaring natural gas than Bitcoin uses.
Okay, yeah. And what's your new conclusions about gold? What are you going to present today?
For me, gold is useless, unethical, and basically over 0.5% of gold produced every year, and over half of all gold that exists above ground is jewelry. So you can argue that's a huge waste.
Yeah, I mean, as far as I know, in countries like in Turkey or in India also, the gold is also the only thing a woman gets when she's married to someone. So it's all they have.
Because you can't trust like the government and monetary system. So people like Indians, Turks, jewelry and gold is a fantastic way to protect their wealth as well. So gold traditionally has been a means for protection of wealth, but also projection of wealth. And the projection element is what I find unethical.
Projection? Do you mean now?
So look how rich I am, projecting the wealth. And if you look at the great empires, all of their buildings adorned with gold leaf, like, we are a strong empire. Look at how much gold we're rocking.
Also the churches, yeah, sure. But it's also a misconception that people often think that gold is worth so much because it's used as jewelry. I mean, it's not. It's only because we think it's a
Look,
lot
as a material with the chemical and physical properties, gold's a fantastic material. So here's a statistic: it's so ductile. You can make 80 kilometers of gold wire from an ounce of gold. So that's why it's extremely useful in tech, especially tech and microprocessing and all of that kind of stuff. Doesn't rust. Is effectively chemically inert. It's probably only a couple of acids that can do anything to gold. But yeah, other than that, useful for cufflinks, as Peter Schiff would say. But other than that, it's a good dense way, to store your money. But it's just for the digital age, not very useful anymore.
So, and are you more optimistic or pessimistic about the development of Bitcoin?
Optimistic.
So it's not going to die anymore.
It can't. Like I said, Bitcoin will succeed because it must. And if it doesn't succeed, I think humanity's in for a bad time.
So it's our only chance.
Yeah, and I it sounds hyperbolic, but I really do believe this. So ever since the global financial crisis, a lot of us millennials have just been looking for a way to fight back against this financial corruption, and for a lot of people that are interested in that, as soon as you show them Bitcoin, it's an instant click for them, and that's how it was with me. Like one of the reasons I left infrastructure, because I got involved in public-private partnerships, and I realized how much private infrastructure fleeces taxpayers, and I just wanted nothing to do with traditional finance. It ruins everything. So even honest things that countries need, like roads, desalination plants. The pension funds and the investors that are funding these things, their returns are effectively highway robbery, and I just didn't want to be involved in that infrastructure anymore. Like I said, Bitcoin's the only economic infrastructure worth looking into and developing.
Do you have any recommendations for our listeners to read about Bitcoin, to learn about it?
Yeah, start with the Stefan Livera podcast, episode 1.
Okay.
Go from there. There's hundreds of good episodes, so I really love Steph's content. Things like it's funny, but the Bitcoin rabbi has a book, Bitcoin Money. I've been trying to explain Bitcoin to my mum for 6 years. Nothing. I gave her a copy of Bitcoin Money, and it clicked. So you don't need to read heavy duty, hardcore, Austrian economics, all of that kind of stuff. You can start with the basics. Another very good resource is 21 Lessons by Gigi. You've got the Nakamoto Institute website. You've got Jameson Lopp's website. I'm trying to think what the
it's Loppnet
URL. Loppnet, isn't it? Yeah. So there's plenty of stuff. Unfortunately, it can be information overload. But take things at your own pace. Bitcoin is a get poor quick scheme. So learn about it slowly. Invest regularly in small amounts. Don't invest more than you can lose. But typically speaking, knowledge about Bitcoin is like directly 100% correlated with how much Bitcoin you start stacking. So the more you learn, the deeper you get down that hole. You find that stacking sats isn't as risky as people say. If you really know what Bitcoin's about and you can really see the future of it, stacking sats, not risky at all. More risky to keep your money in a bank.
Mm-hmm. Do you also use Bitcoin for
Never.
things?
Why would I spend Bitcoin now?
to enable an economy.
So when I'm forced to use Bitcoin, I use it and I rebuy instantly. But it can't be a driver of the economy yet until it reaches like legitimate store of value status. So I'd say, because volatility is very high, which is a natural thing. You got to think of Bitcoin as like a little kiddie pool. You drop a brick in it, you get violent waves and all of that kind of stuff. But when it becomes like an Olympic swimming pool, throw a brick in it and you won't even notice any ripples. So Bitcoin's just got to slowly evolve from kiddie pool to Olympic size pool, and then when that's done, we can start thinking about medium of exchange and all of that. Just simply because so right now, if you got $10 million, which a lot of people do actually, there's a lot of like ridiculous amount of wealth in the world. You get $10 million and put it 100x on BitMEX. One individual can significantly move the price of Bitcoin. They won't be able to do that when it's an Olympic-sized swimming pool. So things will just be more stable and difficult to manipulate. But for now, I do recommend merchants have a BTC server ready to go, just in case they get censored or banned by MasterCard or or even by BitPay. So right now in Hong Kong, BitPay isn't processing donations to the protesters anymore.
Really?
Yeah. So
okay. Yeah.
So I recommend, if a merchant wants to give it a go, BTC Pay server, bit difficult, but give it another year or two. Like I do believe I saw a product the other day.
It's a Nodl. The Nodl IT.
Nodl with built-in BTC pay server, but there's also another product being developed. I can't remember by who, but the Nodl, solid product. For me, I'm not tech savvy enough for the Nodl. I've got a Casa. And I love my Casa. So for the non-technically inclined listeners, I recommend everyone runs a node. For the people that are a bit nervous and non-technically inclined, and have a little bit of money to spare on buying an individual piece of hardware, Casa. For the more technically inclined, Nodl or build your own. And if you don't want to splash out money on a node, download Piero Shard's node launcher, and away you go. One button node. You just got to wait about, depends where you live, between half a day to 2 days to sync up, because laptops aren't as bottlenecked as Raspberry Pis. So if you've got a good internet connection, you'll sync up fairly quickly.
Actually, I'm waiting for the node in my smartphone.
Look soon enough, and I think you can already run one.
Already one,
but
from Udi, I think.
Yeah, but you'd need to prune, unless you got a really, really big SD card or whatever. But typically speaking, 10 gigabytes worth of the blockchain should be enough. So a blockchain now is like 250 gigs, but if you've got 10 gigs worth of recent blocks, I'd be happy enough to trust it. And as phone hard disk capacities go up, 256 gigs, 512 gigs, if you got 50 gigs to spare, just prune up to 50 gig. And that's, take that to the bank. That's a node. That's a full node for me, as far as I'm concerned. That's, that's a couple of years worth of blocks.
Yeah, and it will get easier.
And not just that, every single block gets verified. It just stops adding data after 50 gigs. It just starts dropping data. So you're still validating everything. So I'd recommend 10 gigs is a great place to start. And a lot of people got 10 gigs to spare.
So thank you. Do you have a last sentence or something you want to say to the community?
Yeah. Drop gold. If you got a wedding ring, smelt that down and buy Satoshis and sign a message in the blockchain professing your eternal love for your partner. I think that's even longer lasting than a gold ring that will legitimately last forever and ever and ever.
That's a great idea. Thank you. And the last question, where can people read your work and follow you?
Yeah, so just follow me on Twitter at Hass McCook. And I've got all my links to like my Medium page and all of that kind of stuff. So check it out. Feel free to DM me. I always love a good chat about Bitcoin. And that's basically it.
Yeah, thank you very much, and have a good conference.
No, thank you very much for having me. I would recommend to anyone to check out Honeybadger if you've never checked it out before. So fantastic conference. Don't miss next year's edition.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
So thank you for listening. And please remember to check out the Bitbox O2 hardware wallets. Free shipping with the code Anita at shiftcrypto.ch. 2 editions, both Swiss made, including a Bitcoin only. What can I say? I'm a fan. And thanks also to Card Wallet and Salamantex. That's it for today. Thank you for listening. What did you think of the interview? Did it bring you greater understanding of Bitcoin and its people? If yes, And if you want to support my show, please subscribe to the podcast in your player, leave some stars and share on social media. Feel free to contact me on Twitter, LinkedIn and YouTube, or send me a voice message via the link on the episode page. Goodbye from Vienna. Auf Wiederhören. Music, start with yes, delicate beats. Idea, content and production, yours truly, Anita Posch.